From Music Row in Nashville, Tennessee, this is Hope for the Caregiver, the nation's #1 show for the family caregiver. We're glad you are with us. Welcome. Why are we doing a show for caregivers? Because there are more than 65 million Americans right now who are putting themselves between a vulnerable loved one and even worse disaster, and we're about helping that person who is pushing the wheelchair, that's standing in the hospital room corner, that's up late at night, trying to hold down a job, doing all the things that they do. That's the person that we're interested in equipping to be a stronger, healthier, and dare we even say it, a more joyful person as we take care of things that are very challenging to do, and it's affecting so many people, and the numbers are growing. And speaking of numbers, if you want to call into the show, 877, I have to say this slowly because my wife says I say it too fast, 877-655-6755. Now, that is slow. And speaking of slow, when you I'm sorry. But we also want to introduce, he is with us here. We are live here on Music Row, and he is large and in charge. He's the producer of the show. He's the Baron of the Board, the Sultan of the Sound, the Earl of Engineering, the man who puts the word care into Pirates of the Caribbean. He is John Butler, the Count of Mighty Disco, everyone.
Oh, man. That, of all of the titles you have bestowed upon me throughout the course of this show, that one was one of the most elaborate, well thought out, reach of a dad joke for
actually,
you.
I have to confess.
Okay.
They've been showing Pirates of the Caribbean on cable a lot. And I thought, I don't know what's going on with that, but I thought, as I was looking at the title, Pirates of the Caribbean,
right.
But I thought maybe John could put care.
Oh, back in the Caribbean. I'm with it. I am with it.
Are you doing well?
I am. I'll have to check into that. The kids love those movies, so
and so do you.
Oh boy.
Hey, listen.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. We got a big show today.
Oh yeah, we do.
Do you have your bow tie on?
I do not.
Fish one out because I know you keep a spare on all times. We've got a very important guest calling in later on today.
Oh really?
Dr. Gary Chapman. He is the New York Times bestselling author of The 5 Love Languages, which sold like bazillion copies.
Yeah.
And also he's been a caregiver.
That was my next question. What's the caregiver angle besides the obvious of,
Well, but we're going to talk about that and how the 5 love languages interact with the family caregiver.
I imagine there's a lot of overlap there.
I think there will. And I just want to turn it over to him and just be quiet and listen. Because this is a man who has, through the fabric of our country and around the world, it's been translated, I don't know how many languages, has really helped people understand more about what it's like to be in a relationship with someone and what they are speaking. And then we as caregivers, we have to learn an additional language. One of our love languages may be receiving gifts. That's one of them.
Correct.
But as caregivers, we have to learn the language of service. And it's not our native tongue. So we're going to talk about that with him today.
Well, good deal. Well, like you said, you just want to let him talk. I'll cut your mic for you. It's all right. Yeah.
I think there's an online petition for you to do that anyway.
Well,
go ahead and cut the mic. And I want to give a quick shout out to my wife and her friend Lori, because yesterday Lori is a runner and she participates in these things, and there was a 5K here.
Okay.
The Music City, MOOSIC, Music City, sponsored by Purity Dairy.
Yeah, I love Purity Dairy.
Well,
absolutely.
And who doesn't?
Well, seriously,
But they had a 5K.
Okay.
Lori runs. She pushed Gracie in a wheelchair for it.
Really?
And then Gracie got up and did the last about 10 yards and pushed Lori in the wheelchair over the finish line.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I got a shot of that.
Oh, that's fantastic. So that's perfect.
That's Gracie's first 5K, and I think she was the only double amputee woman out there.
I was going to say, well, that is amazing. Let me give a shout out
and Gracie said,
to Gracie and Lori as well.
Yes, please do. And Gracie said, well, I feel bad because Lori did. And Lori said, look, Gracie, this is only the first. You're going to build up from here.
There you go.
And she got a medal and everything.
Right on.
And so, how about that? That's kind of cool. So
that's a little bit more than kind of cool, Peter.
Well, it is. And my wife never ceased. And I will tell you this. This is a little something she may not want everybody to know, but I think that ship has sailed on this show.
It's just betwixt us, Peter.
It is just us. But sorry, I had to cough there a little bit, but I was getting all choked up. She's got about a 4 or 5 inch lead into her spinal cord area.
Okay.
They're testing this new device, and the wires are actually sticking out of her back.
Okay.
They've got it all bandaged up, and there's a little electronic device on her side. She's had, you know what a TENS unit is?
Yeah. It's a transdermal electrical stimulation, something like that?
Right. This is like a TENS unit on steroids.
Well, it's not transdermal, it's subdermal.
Yeah. It's in there. It's into some very delicate areas. And if it works, they're going to take it out on Tuesday, and then they'll put in the implanted device, and it's all sealed up. So she's doing this yesterday with this. I mean, and she says it messes with the signal on her phone. So she's talking on her phone. And the phone keeps going out, and she's blaming this device.
Oh,
and I don't know if that's accurate or not, but
we'll set up some double-blind studies.
No, we're not. We're just going to go ahead and take her word for it. And say that's what it is.
Yeah, I find that sometimes the truth doesn't matter.
My wife is a double amputee, both legs. I have learned in my years, you don't go toe-to-toe with a woman who ain't got any.
Well, or when her toes are titanium.
I mean, it just doesn't work. Just let it go. And that brings me to our caregiver tip of the day. Our caregiver tip of the day. That's not our caregiver tip of the day soundtrack.
It is now.
Okay. Well, I need one of those really long microphones that Gene Rayburn used with the little,
with the little thing.
It was like a lightsaber. You know,
it really was.
It was like these long.
It looked like he was holding a chopstick. You know.
All right, our caregiver tip of the day. You don't have to go to every fight that you get a ticket to.
Oh, I love that one.
You don't have to go to every fight that you get a ticket to. Now, why am I saying this? Well, I was with some friends earlier, and the father has dementia.
Okay.
And he will say things that are rather abrasive. And I was watching, at one point I watched his wife tear up because it was just so harsh.
Yeah.
And then daughter was there helping it, and I thought, and I pulled him aside and said, you don't have to go to every fight you get a ticket to. Because I was going to do something different for our caregiver tip of the day. I actually have notes, and you can see, John, for those of you following at home, I actually scratched it out.
Oh,
right here.
Good. Okay.
For those of you watching on Facebook Live.
Because you can log on to Facebook Live and watch the show.
Hope for the Caregiver on Facebook, and you can watch it live. But those of you can see, I can see it right there. There's my notes. Don't tell anybody I did notes for this. It'll ruin my reputation.
This is a closed book test, Peter.
I know. When I first started doing this show, before we get back to our caregiver tip of the day, when I first started doing this show, WLAC looked at me, and that's where I do the show from, in iHeart here in Nashville, and then it's syndicated around the country now. Mm-hmm. And I want to welcome Greenville, South Carolina again.
Hey, all right.
His radio down there in Greenville, South Carolina. Thank you so much, AM 660.
That's your hometown station.
That is. And I'm just, hello, everybody at home. But I remember when they first told me, I'm going to do this show, and they said, okay, all we ask is that you don't script it. And I looked at them and I thought, well, was that an expectation?
We were never in any danger here.
And I've done a couple of things, TV things, and I did one a while back for AARP when Jeff and I did the whole "You Might Be a Caregiver If," and then I've done a couple things with them. And there was one producer they brought in who was trying to script it, and I remember Karen from AARP was looking at the lady, the director, coming in and says, "Don't script him. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The man can't follow a script.
You don't put dolphins in the horse corral, all right?
It's just not going to work." So anyway, so I changed it because I saw tears. I saw the frustration, and I think that you got to realize that when you're dealing with somebody who is impaired, whether that it's through dementia or pharmaceuticals or just life, or maybe they're just having a bad day, you don't have to go to every fight that you get a ticket to. I think sometimes there's that tendency that we want to correct all wrongs.
Yeah, someone has. We see this a lot with the internet. When we have arguments and stuff like this. Just because somebody says something that's wrong doesn't mean it is not your job to correct them all the time.
I do not have to prove you wrong in order for me to be right.
There you go.
And I think that's something we get into as caregivers because our loved ones are saying things, and we're the closest ones to them. And so, therefore, we get the brunt of that sometimes.
Right. And we have the proximity makes us think that we do need to correct this. And especially in the case like dementia,
how do you fix dementia?
Yeah.
How do you argue with diabetes? How do you argue with amputation? I mean, there's an impairment. You don't try to argue with it. You just let it go.
We're not saying there's not an urge to do this. There's
a big urge to do it.
Yeah. This is just recognition of the fact that you're not going to be effective in doing this.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not fair to either one because I don't even think they realize they're doing it some of the times.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And I learned from martial arts, and I'll do this really quickly, if somebody's throwing a punch at you, you don't have to let them hit you and then hit them back harder to prove your point. That's the Trump doctrine. Because believe me, I'm going to hit you, and I'm going to hit you so hard it's going to hurt. I'm going to knock you into another family. It's going to really hurt. And so you don't have to do that.
No.
So you don't have to do that. And you don't have to overpower them with your personality or try to catch the punch. Think about if somebody's throwing a punch at you, you don't want to try to catch the fist. So what you want to do is you just want to turn 15 degrees. Just let it go on by. Just let it go on by like we do in martial arts. Just let it go on by. Their punch and their energy goes somewhere else, and nobody gets hurt. You don't have to push back at them and all that kind of stuff. So that's just a little something today for you from our Caregiver Tip of the Day, brought to you by AARP of Tennessee. They're aarp.tn.org. No, wait a minute, aarp.org/TN. Sorry about that. And they have an enormous amount of resources for caregivers. I mean, just for caregivers. You don't even have to join, but their stuff is out there. I want to make sure you know where stuff is so that you have access to these resources. And speaking of which, I got to tell you something. Do we have time? How much time?
We have 60 seconds.
Oh, well, then I won't tell you. You'll have to stay on for the break.
There you go.
All right, now, hey, 877-655-6755 is our number. You can give us a call. We'll be glad to talk to you. And at the next half hour, Dr. Gary Chapman, author of The 5 Love Languages, will be with us. And you don't want to miss this. This will be it'll be huge. It'll be so awesome. It'll be huge. This is Peter Rosenberger. This is Hope for the Caregiver, the nation's #1 show for the family caregiver. We're glad you're with us. We'll be right back.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or if you signed up for a plan you're not happy with, you still have a choice. MediShare is a healthcare sharing program. Hundreds of thousands of Christians are part of this. It can save you a lot. Typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. You can join MediShare anytime. It's easy to call and look into it. There's no pressure at all. And man, what a difference it can make. 855-25-SHARE. That's 855-25-SHARE.
Have you ever struggled to trust God when lousy things happen to you? I have. I'm Gracie Rosenberger, and in 1983, I experienced a horrific car accident leading to 80 surgeries and both legs amputated. I questioned why God allowed something so brutal to happen to me, but over time, my questions changed, and I discovered courage to trust God. That understanding, along with an appreciation for quality prosthetic limbs, led me to establish Standing with Hope. For more than a dozen years, we've been working with the government of Ghana and West Africa, equipping and training local workers to build and maintain quality prosthetic limbs for their own people. On a regular basis, we purchase and ship equipment and supplies. And with the help of inmates in a Tennessee prison, we also recycle parts from donated limbs. All of this is to point others to Christ, the source of my hope and strength. Please visit standingwithhope.com to learn more and participate in lifting others up. That's standingwithhope.com. I'm Gracie, and I am Standing with Hope.
Welcome back to the show for caregivers, about caregivers, hosted by a caregiver. This is Hope for the Family Caregiver. We're glad you're with us. You want more information, you can go to hopeforthecaregiver.com, and we are so glad you are with us. Hey, John.
Hey, Peter.
Hey, I got to tell y'all something. Hey, let me just break into the breaking news here.
So we just jumping right into this now?
We're just jumping right into it. We are I've spent a lot of time in a hospital over these these many years of being a caregiver. And so I was at the hospital on one particular occasion, and not one. Let me just go ahead and just say dozens of occasions. And I've slept in those chairs beside the hospital beds.
Okay. The ones that fold out into a
yes,
long...
I've slept on the cots beside the hospital beds.
Okay.
I've asked the hospital to give me a pillow. And they brought me these things, and I think what it is, it's a plastic bag that's stuffed with dirty clothes, wrapped with duct tape, and then a pillowcase over that.
Okay, right on.
That is basically the equivalent of a lot of hospital pillows that I've used over the years.
I'm really interested to see, like, your history of Yelp reviews.
Well, so I was talking about this with Mike Lindell. Do you know who Mike Lindell? For those of you who don't know Mike Lindell, I just met him. I talked to him, and he's the guy that does MyPillow.com.
Right. We've heard his ads.
Everybody's seen it.
Yeah.
Well, he sent me some pillows.
Okay.
Darn if they're not nice pillows.
Okay.
They are everything he says they are.
Are these things that you would keep one in the trunk when you go to the hospital?
Yeah, caregivers have to sleep in odd places. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that we have to be miserable when we do it.
Odd places,
like the sofa, the floor, the cot beside the hospital bed,
or the back of a Volkswagen.
Been there, done that,
yeah.
And all the above.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? We might as well have a nice pillow while we're at it.
Absolutely.
And so he sent me one. So I just want to give a shout out. Thank you. And,
and
go check it out and see for yourself. And I was just floored. And I thought, well, that's a very nice gift.
Not floored. Floor with pillow.
John, let me handle the humor. But anyway. Is that what we're calling it now? Humor?
Yeah, I was going to say.
All right, look, we got our.
I can't see the air quotes on it's radio, Peter. It's not television.
Humor, lasers. But I would like to do our today's senior moment, but we don't have a theme song for that.
We don't have a theme song for today's senior
we
moment.
ought to think of a theme song.
We'll take Golden Years from David Bowie. There you go.
Through the years, we'll do that with Kenny Rogers.
There you go.
Our today's senior moment. And I came up with the title myself. There was just crickets there.
Just leaving that one hang.
There was not even any affirmation whatsoever. Rough crowd. But today's senior moment brought to you by our friends at Morning Point Senior Center and Memory Care Center and Senior Living Centers.
We love them to death.
Morning Point, POINTE, morningpoint.com. And last week we talked about wandering.
Yes.
Okay, not wandering.
Wandering.
Or as I grew up saying, wandering. I was just wondering what y'all
Get
doing.
your pencil.
No, it's pencil.
Oh,
wandering. But
how many vowels are in that?
This is wandering. And I was talking to our Canadian caregiver correspondent.
Oh, yes.
And Tracy Maxfield, who's going to be in next week. She's going to call in next week.
Okay.
And she was talking about this, and she said that it's really not wandering. They are walking with a purpose. They're going somewhere. Now, maybe going back to 1951.
Yeah, they're not
just
same world.
aimlessly walking. And so it's really important. And I just thought that was interesting. I just wanted to kind of do an amendment to last week's Today's Senior Moment. That don't look at it as they're just aimlessly walking into the door or the corner or off somewhere. They're actually going somewhere.
Yeah, they're going back to the library or something like that, and they're just not in the directions are still in their head. They're just not in the spot where they started the directions originally.
And I thought that was rather insightful.
Yeah, that's
a helpful piece. So if you can gauge them in where they are, not where you would necessarily like them to be.
Yeah,
because they may not be able to join you where you'd like them to be. And that's hard.
It also makes it very difficult if they do wander off and somebody who doesn't know them finds them or sees them. They're walking with a purpose.
Engage them. However you can. The more information you can give to the surrounding community around you, whether it's family, whether it's your neighborhood watch or whatever, let them know that this is where they kind of live, and it's okay. It's not.
And they're a part of an at-risk population, and you should treat them as such.
Exactly. So that was just a little amendment to our today's senior moment. Now, you didn't pull up Through the Years, did you?
I didn't, no. I was busy.
Gracie's watching. Maybe she could sing that for us.
Oh, there you
go. Through the years. Come on, Gracie, sing it with us. So that is brought to you by our folks over at Morning Point Senior Living and Memory Care Centers, morningpoint.com, and that's point with an E. And also want to give a big shout-out to the folks again in Greenville, South Carolina, 92.9. Now, why is that important? Well, that's my hometown. But my mother's in the hospital down there. I was with her last week, and she's going to have a pretty gnarly surgery this week. And so I got to spend time with Mom and Dad.
Did you have your pillow with you?
I didn't have my pillow with me.
Okay.
But I thought about it.
Okay.
But I did get to interact with my father as two caregiving husbands for the first time, and it was a very meaningful time that I had with both of them. So anyway, I just want to give a shout out, Dad and Mom. Love you. We're praying for you, and it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. And listen, this is Hope for the Caregiver. This is the nation's #1 show for the family caregiver. We're on a mission to strengthen you as a caregiver, to help you stay strong and healthy as you take care of someone who is not. And we're so glad you're with us. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Next segment, Dr. Gary Chapman, author of The 5 Love Languages. You don't want to miss it. We'll be right back.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or if you signed up for a plan you're not happy with, you still have a choice. MediShare is a healthcare sharing program. Hundreds of thousands of Christians are part of this. It can save you a lot. Typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. You can join MediShare anytime. It's easy to call and look into it. There's no pressure at all. And man, what a difference it can make. 855-25-SHARE. That's 855-25-SHARE.
Have you ever struggled to trust God when lousy things happen to you? I have. I'm Gracie Rosenberger, and in 1983, I experienced a horrific car accident leading to 80 surgeries and both legs amputated. I questioned why God allowed something so brutal to happen to me, but over time, my questions changed, and I discovered courage to trust God. That understanding, along with an appreciation for quality prosthetic limbs, led me to establish Standing with Hope. For more than a dozen years, we've been working with the government of Ghana and West Africa, equipping and training local workers to build and maintain quality prosthetic limbs for their own people. On a regular basis, we purchase and ship equipment and supplies. And with the help of inmates in a Tennessee prison, we also recycle parts from donated limbs. All of this is to point others to Christ, the source of my hope and strength. Please visit standingwithhope.com to learn more and participate in lifting others up. That's standingwithhope.com. I'm Gracie, and I am Standing with Hope.
When things go wrong, I seem to be bad. I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. Oh, Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood.
Welcome back to the show for caregivers, about caregivers, hosted by a caregiver. This is Peter Rosenberger. I'm so glad that you're with us. Hope for the caregiver is what we're all about. And I love that song, John. Don't let me be misunderstood.
Oh, yeah.
So appropriate, because we have on the phone with us Dr. Gary Chapman. He's from North Carolina. He is the author, New York Times bestselling author of The 5 Love Languages, which has been almost required reading for couples for years and years and years. So, Dr. Chapman, are you with us?
I am, Peter. Great to be with you today.
It is. What a treat. I am so thrilled that you took time on a Sunday afternoon to call our show and to share about this. I came across you in a foreword that you wrote for a devotional book for Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers.
Yes.
And I was reading that and saw where you took care of your mother with dementia. And I thought, you know what? I bet this man has some very interesting thoughts now as he's entered that world of when he entered the world of being a caregiver after understanding the 5 love languages. And I thought we could have some interesting insights from you on this, because, as I said in the last segment, there's so many people that are learning a different language than what they inherently have as caregivers. They're having to learn the service language probably more, and it's not their native tongue. And I thought, would you just take a moment to unpack that a little bit and in that environment and what it's like to have to grow in that relationship, particularly for spouses? I mean, it's going to apply across the board in every relationship, but particularly with spouses.
Yeah. Well, I think you're exactly right, Peter. I think with spouses, hopefully you have a good relationship. You're experiencing life together and everything's going great, and I don't mean perfect, because life is never perfect. But then dementia sets in for one of you, And the early stages, you're kind of adapting to the idea that, oh, this is not too good here. Something's going on. And then as it develops, of course, through various stages of dementia, then it gets even more difficult. And especially, I think the most painful thing is when you get to the place where they don't know who you are. That's really, really painful. I wrote a book with a medical doctor, Dr. Ed Shaw, whose wife came down with the disease at 53. And he says the most painful day was the day she said to me, "Now, I don't know who you are." He said, "I went in the bathroom and just wept because I knew, this is another stage in the journey." And, of course, it gets to be, especially after that, it gets to be a one-way street where you as a caregiver are loving them, but as the disease moves on, they're not capable of reciprocating love to you. And I think that's where it gets to be really, really difficult. And one of the things that we talk about in that book is the caregiver's need to feel loved. Because, listen, whether we're married, single, or whatever, we all have the need to feel loved by significant people in our lives. And so that's where we encourage the caregiver, make sure that your extended family and friends at church know what makes you feel loved. What is your love language? Because they can meet that void. I mean, they can't take the place of a spouse, but you can know deep in your heart and you can feel loved by people if they're speaking your love language.
Well, this is where I think also pastors, and you're a pastor, and this is where your heart is, and I think pastors and churches, lay leaders, and so forth can really step up and communicate the gospel into these situations where people can understand. You have to learn to tap into the inexhaustible love of God in order to be able to give love freely to folks who cannot necessarily reciprocate. But that's what God does for us. And
exactly. We use the Old Testament word hesed, the Hebrew word hesed, which is often translated in English loving kindness. But it's God's love. It's just what you're talking about. It's unconditional love. It's loving not because you're receiving. It's loving because, the Scriptures say the love of God is poured into our hearts by the Holy Spirit. So we become God's representatives of reaching out and loving. And I think if we can understand, if the caregiver can understand that I have a significant role to play here, and emotional love is a part of it. One of the things we discovered when we wrote this book called Keeping Love Alive as Memories Fade, the 5 love languages in the Alzheimer's, in the Alzheimer's disease, is that long after the cognitive abilities are gone in the dementia patient, they can still feel loved. The emotional center of the brain is still alive, and they can still feel loved, and they can also feel hurt. You yell at them because they ask you the same question 20 times, and you say, "Don't ask me that again." They feel that, and sometimes caregivers don't know that because the spouse and the patient is not responding cognitively. They think they don't, and sometimes they say to me, "Well, they're in at home. Why should I go see them? They don't even know who I am." Well, they may not know who you are, but they can feel loved by you. And it's not that they keep the same love language. I'm often asked that. They don't keep the same love language through the process. But the 5 love languages gives you 5 ways to dip in and try to hit their emotional center. And when you do, you'll get a response. When you do, you'll know it. And they live in the moment, of course. In the middle and latter stages, they live in the moment. And that's what we want to do, is touch them in the moment and let them feel that we love them.
What has surprised you when you journeyed into the role of caregiver and watching your mother slip away, and what surprised you? Because here you are, you're this best-selling author, pastor, this is your world, and all of a sudden now this has come really personal now as you're trying to build and maintain a relationship with someone who is increasingly becoming infirmed. Talk a little bit about that journey if you can.
Well, my father died first. He died at 85, and my sister and her husband built a house right beside of them for my mother. The idea is they were going to take care of Mom as she got older. Well, it turns out my sister gets cancer at 50 and has an 8-year battle with cancer. So my mother ends up taking care of my sister till she dies. Well, I'm the only child left. There was just 2 of us. So now Mom's my responsibility. And I live an hour away from her, but she was at home, and she was beside my brother-in-law. Later, he remarried, and his wife was very wonderful to my mother. So I had to rely a lot on caregivers. Pretty early on, I realized Mom's at the place where she can't cook. We didn't, she couldn't coordinate cooking a meal. And I remember when we unplugged the stove, and just said, no more cooking, Mom. So I relied on caregivers really around the clock for about 7 years.
Well, I got to tell you, in the early days, not with my mother now, she's really a good cook now, and she may be listening to this in the hospital. But there were times when my brothers and I wanted to unplug the stove.
Watch it. Mom's still.
It's not that she wasn't a good cook; it's that she just went different with it sometimes.
I hear you.
So there's been many times, but I went home one time and she was cooking these fabulous gourmet meals. This is much later after. Well, I have 4 brothers and a sister, so Mom cooked like army chow. And so I went home sometime, and I looked at my parents, and they had this beautiful meal. And I said, "Who are you, and what have you done with my parents?" But and I get that, because you have to stop doing certain things. And I've watched this, and for me, and as I was dealing with this with my father last week, as he was caring for my mother in the hospital, she's facing this surgery this week, and my father has loved me with just lavish love. I don't remember any day when my father has not poured out love like that. But for the briefest moment, I could never reciprocate what he had done for me. But for the briefest moment last week, I was able to give back to him a measure of the kind of love that he's given me. And we just talked together as 2 men who loved our wives, who both were hurting. And I thought, that's a picture of the body of Christ. And Christ loves his wounded bride, and that's us. We are the wounded bride of Christ. And as somebody who's cared for a wounded bride for a lifetime like I have, I'm starting to see mirrors of that. And how does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think you're right. I remember when my mother said to me one day, when she still had a lot of cognitive abilities, because I had these sitters I was paying for, and she said, you're going to run out of money. You can't keep paying these sitters like this for me. And I said, well, Mom, I don't know. Maybe I will run out of money. But look at it this way, Mom. I said, you paid everything for me for 18 years till I went off to college. And I said, I've only been doing this 5 years. I said, I got a lot more years to go.
I love that.
How do you calculate interest on that? That's what I want to
know. Well, you have it. And folks now are engaging in relationships that they are really not prepared for. And that's one of the reasons I do this show, is to help people understand what's going on in these dynamics. And this is, as spouses, we're living longer, but our minds aren't necessarily living as long. And so we're having to engage with people that we've known a lifetime in a much different way. And so this is why I felt like you coming on today and just reintroducing this concept that there's more than one way to demonstrate and receive love. And then I wanted to also let you hit on, in the little bit of time we have here, of learning this second language of love, because the service component of the 5 love languages is not necessarily a native language to some people.
Well, you're right, and I think even a lot of the other languages are not native languages that we have to learn. But what's really been encouraging to me with Dr. Shaw, working with him, because he resigned his job as the head of the oncology department at the hospital. Okay, went back to college and got a master's in counseling, and came back and set up a memory counseling clinic to work especially with caregivers and dementia patients, and it's mainly spouses who are working with them.
By the way, tell us that book again, because I got people posting online that are watching it live, and they want to know what the name of that book is again. Yeah,
it's called Keeping Love Alive as Memories Fade, and the subtitle is The 5 Love Languages and the Alzheimer's Journey. It's published by Moody Publishers. It's a Northfield imprint, but it's Moody Publishers out of Chicago. They can find it anywhere online. But one of the things he does is when one of them is diagnosed with the disease, any form of dementia, he helps them learn each other's love language while they still have cognitive abilities. And often they get closer together emotionally than they've been for several years, which is a good way to begin this journey, being really emotionally connected. And, of course, the simple concept of the love languages is that what makes me feel loved doesn't necessarily make my spouse feel loved. So I have to learn their love language, what makes them feel loved. And when I speak it, their love tank fills up, they feel loved, and it's much easier to process the journey when they feel loved. And so, that's what's helpful for caregivers of anyone. It doesn't have to be dementia patients. If you're a caregiver and your spouse has a good mind, okay, then let's make sure that you know their love language and they know your love language so that you can speak each other's language while you walk through the journey.
That is wonderful. Well, listen, we're going to take a break here in just a minute, but before we do, I got to take care of one little piece of business. Then I got a special gift for you at the next segment. If you can hang on a little bit, okay?
Sure. Be glad to.
All right, because I'm going to tell you all really quickly. I need legs. I need legs. Okay. I need lots of legs. We have a prosthetic limb ministry. And we collect used prosthetic limbs.
He really means actual legs.
I've got some in the car right now. My wife is a double amputee, and when she gave up her legs, she wanted to reach to her fellow amputees in West Africa. We've been doing this for a long time, and we collect used limbs from all over the country. They go to a local prison here run by Core Civic, where inmates volunteer to disassemble these things for us, and they strip them down so we can use all the parts, the recyclable parts, feet, pylons, knees, all of this. And we send all this over to West Africa, and then we will purchase new stuff, and they'll build a custom fit leg on site there in Africa for amputees. You give a man a leg and he's going to walk. You teach and equip a man to make legs, and hundreds will walk. But if you do this to share the gospel with all of this, you're going to equip them to stand with hope. And that's the name of the company that Gracie and I started, the ministry we started. It's called standingwithhope.com. And I would really appreciate you going out there, because I call it Operation Footloose, Dr. Chapman. Turn that foot loose so we can recycle it. And but we're the only ones in the country that do this with inmates who will recycle these prosthetic limbs with us. And it's a great program, and I go over to the prison quite a bit. And one of the most touching things I had is one of the inmates whose wife, he was a caregiver for his wife who was an amputee, and she ended up passing away. And in the process, as she went through this long illness, he turned to drinking and so forth, and he made a lot of destructive choices, ended up in prison. But when he heard about our program, he got involved with it and started helping us with recycling limbs over there. And it was just one of those beautiful redemption stories. Yeah. And Standing with Hope is the presenting sponsor of this show. And I wanted folks just to be able to go, if you know somebody with a prosthetic limb and they're not using it, it's just sitting around in a closet somewhere because somebody passed away or whatever, please don't throw it away. Send it to standingwithhope.com. We're going to take a quick break, and then I'll be back, and I got a gift for you, Dr. Chapman, okay?
All right.
Don't go away. This is Peter Rosenberg. This is Hope for the Caregiver, and I'm on the phone here with Dr. Gary Chapman, author of The 5 Love Languages. And wait till you hear what's going to happen in the next segment. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or if you signed up for a plan you're not happy with, you still have a choice. MediShare is a healthcare sharing program. Hundreds of thousands of Christians are part of this. It can save you a lot. Typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. You can join MediShare anytime. It's easy to call and look into it. There's no pressure at all. And man, what a difference it can make. 855-25-SHARE. That's 855-25-SHARE.
Have you ever struggled to trust God when lousy things happen to you? I have. I'm Gracie Rosenberger, and in 1983, I experienced a horrific car accident leading to 80 surgeries and both legs amputated. I questioned why God allowed something so brutal to happen to me, but over time, my questions changed, and I discovered courage to trust God. That understanding, along with an appreciation for quality prosthetic limbs, led me to establish Standing with Hope. For more than a dozen years, we've been working with the government of Ghana and West Africa, equipping and training local workers to build and maintain quality prosthetic limbs for their own people. On a regular basis, we purchase and ship equipment and supplies. And with the help of inmates in a Tennessee prison, we also recycle parts from donated limbs. All of this is to point others to Christ, the source of my hope and strength. Please visit standingwithhope.com to learn more and participate in lifting others up. That's standingwithhope.com. I'm Gracie, and I am Standing with Hope.
It would be to show me how you feel. More than words is all you have to do to make it real.
Welcome back to the show for caregivers, about caregivers, hosted by a caregiver. This is Hope for the Caregiver. I am Peter Rosenberger, bringing you 3 decades of experience to help you stay strong and healthy as you take care of someone who is not, and we are thrilled that you're with us. I have been talking with Dr. Gary Chapman, author of The 5 Love Languages. But now, sadly, in the break, we dropped the call. Somehow he dropped the call here. So we've had a substitute calling in. He's going to call back in a second, but I got a substitute that called in. This is singer-songwriter, award-winning singer-songwriter Gary Chapman on the phone. So, Gary, you're going to have to stall with us until he calls back.
No.
We don't know what happened.
I'm a doctor, absolutely. People should call in with whatever problem they have.
Well,
I can consult on any issue.
when I told you that he was going to be on the show, that I said, have you ever met him? You said, no, but I've signed a lot of his books.
It's true. I have to apologize to him. I have posed as him many times.
Well, I don't know what's happened here because we dropped a call, but hopefully he'll call back in a second. But so you're going to have to sub in and talk about the 5 love languages, Gary.
Oh yeah, I'm fluent.
Which one is your love language?
Well, I actually write them more than I speak them. So it's a weird condition. No, I think I'm probably driven more by the. Let me see here. I've got them in front of me, and I just want to make sure I pick the right one because I try to speak them all.
Well, we got
I think words of affirmation.
the ones are you got words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch.
Yeah, like I said, I speak all those.
Well, I don't, and I'm barely fluent in the ones I do speak. But I think I do have him back on the phone here. So let me introduce you to him. John, is he with us?
Nope. It just it dropped right away. Something's up.
So
Yeah.
well, we're having technical difficulties, but
I think he's probably found out what you're up to.
well,
He's been avoiding me his whole life.
he's and he,
Well, bad things might happen. This might not be supposed to happen.
this was a close one. He almost got confronted with it. Well, listen, by the way, you owe our listeners something. You need to come back on here and tell the story that you told with about your father and as you took care of him and as he stepped into glory. And we won't be able to do it today, and I don't want to disrespect the story because it is. We were all in tears when you were telling it at this event I saw you at in Franklin.
It
And
does take a minute, though. Yeah, I'll be happy to.
you've got to, because, and that's a story that needs to be told. Because your journey and how it's affected you in caring for your father through this process of him becoming sick and then stepping into glory and what that did to you. And in the last minute that I have, just as a writer, because you are a prolific writer, songwriter, what did that do to you?
That moment with him?
No, just the whole journey of caring for him through that process as a writer.
As a writer, I can tell you I can't put the words together in that short a time, but I'll do the best I can. For me, that has become literally the fulcrum point of my life.
That is...
it's just a very, very pivotal thing. I learned so much about myself that I didn't expect, and more than anything, I learned so much about God that I thought I already knew. And I did.
We got Dr. Chapman back on, and I got 45 more seconds. So, Dr. Chapman?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry we lost you, but I have Gary Chapman, singer-songwriter Gary Chapman, on the phone, and he's never met you, but he signed a lot of your books, and so he wanted to meet you. So, Gary Chapman, I want you to meet Gary Chapman.
Hello, Gary.
How are you doing? I need your
Oh, that's great. Keep on signing them, Gary.
And I think I may have returned a few emails. So
you can handle the emails. Just answer for me all those problems people have. Okay.
Well, and
I would love to sit down someday. I think we would actually have a lot of laughter.
We probably would.
Probably should write the 5 languages of songwriting. That's the one thing you haven't done yet.
Well,
I'm gonna leave that up to you.
Well, all I could say is we made history on this show because you two are just meeting for the first time, and I cannot think of anything more delightful. Both of you, and Gary Chapman and Gary Chapman. Gary, you owe me to come in here, and you owe our listeners that because they really need to hear from your heart on this. And Dr. Chapman, I want you to know how much I appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, you are welcome, Peter. I appreciate what you guys are doing. Keep up the good work, okay?
All right. And, Gary, I look forward to seeing you anytime, man. Thank you.
All right, brother. Good to meet you, Doc.
All right. Hey, listen, this is
good to
Hope for the
meet you.
Caregiver, and we're so glad you're with us. There's more at hopeforthecaregiver.com. We'll see you next week.